Hi, Legal Advisors here, welcoming you to yet another spoiler-filled, unprofessional, unedited, one-take review of Netflix series 1899. This is episode 7, The Storm. And in full disclosure, this is actually a three-take review. The first one I just screwed up so badly I couldn't possibly continue, and so I reset everything. And the second take involved me not actually turning my camera on. So here we are. This is actually the third take of my one-take review, which just makes it extra unprofessional, but it's still unedited. So let's jump right into this because this is going to be the longest one yet. My notes are 3 pages longer than normal. We've got one episode to go after this, so everything's starting to come together. Stories are coming to an end. Everything's starting to mesh together. Questions are being answered. Let's dive right into it. This particular episode starts off with a sex scene, and as the skin kind of gets, the camera pulls away from the skin, and we see it's Mara and Daniel Solace. They're in bed. Because if you remember the end of the last episode, he tried to convince her that they've been married for 12 years, but she has no memory of it. And at the end of their lovemaking session, he says, "I love you. Never forget. Everyone's reality is inside your mind." And Mara looks at him and says, "Well, then is everything real, or is everything just a mental construct?" So they're starting to question reality. Then suddenly there's a big purge-like siren that goes off through the ship, or through wherever it is they're at. And Daniel hears this, and he says they're initiating shutdown. And he runs out, and it turns out that they were inside the pyramid. I guess they live inside the pyramid. And then Mara's voice says, "Wake up," which is happening every single episode. And then suddenly Daniel, he's in the room inside the hospital where the chair is at, this examination chair where she keeps getting drugged to, and he's locked inside there. And then the shutdown has started. He tells her, "Mara, let me out. There's not much time before everyone dies again. I need my device," referring to the little uh, remote control thing that Mara took from him in the last episode. He's still locked in the room. And Mara, she starts having a dream that she's running through the ship. It's kind of a hazy, foggy dream. And all of the survivors, well, most of the survivors meet on the bridge. The rest are in the engine room. And they talk about how they need to find the captain. They need someone to steer the ship. Nobody knows how to steer the ship. And so the survivors, they go look for the captain, and then they send some to go to the engine room and see if there's someone there that can pilot the ship, that can navigate the ship. And the ship starts getting really, really tossed around by the waves. And then it cuts back to Daniel. He's trying to break out of the room inside the hospital that's in this dream world, or the real world, or we don't know which world it is yet. And he rips off a wall panel, and there's a bunch of wires inside. Then it cuts to Mara. This whole episode is just full of quick cuts. It cuts to Mara. She runs into the CO, who we know is somehow involved with Mara's dad, who is the one that created this hospital and who is apparently orchestrating all of this, whatever is happening. So Mara meets the chief officer. He pretends to not know the master's gone. But he says he's also looking for the captain. So it seems that he actually doesn't know where the captain is. And he's also looking for the boy, this mysterious boy with the black pyramid that's been everywhere. He's looking for him. Mara says that, Mara, she sees that Mrs. Wilson has this black hand because, you remember, she touched this weird crystal thing in the last episode, this black crystal or charcoaly thing that was growing out of the walls. And it kind of attacked her. Now it's causing her body to turn black, I guess. So her whole hand is black, and it's starting to creep up her arm. And Mrs. Wilson says, "Look at it, I'm going to die." But then Mara says something off the cuff really strange. Says, "Just start to think of this as a bad memory." And says, "Well, maybe the captain's back in his memory." Meaning that, I guess, like the tunnel inside inside the captain's room, that went back to the memory of his wife and daughters before they burned up in the fire. So he says, "Well, maybe the captain's back in his memory." And Mrs. Wilson, she just looks really confused, like, "What do you mean the captain's back in his memory?" But then it cuts to the chief officer. He runs down this hallway. He pulls out this drawer from a random cabinet and takes out a rather futuristic device that it sort of looks like a tablet computer. Basically, it looks like a tablet, but it's much more advanced. And he starts searching through schematics of the ship, looking for the captain, but he can't find him. And then it cuts to Mara. She goes back to the captain's house, and the background is like really glitchy. It's kind of getting like, like there's a glitch in the Matrix kind of thing. The background's getting glitchy. She runs into the captain's wife in the house, and she just keeps repeating, "May I help you? Are you lost? May I help you? Are you lost?" But she starts glitching out robo style. She's like Max Headroom, twitching and whatnot. So she starts glitching, and then Mara runs away. Then it cuts back to Daniel, who is now crawling through the electrical system of the ship. He's crawling through there, and he enters out into this like western desert landscape with a well, and it's just out in the middle of the desert. But it's glitching as well. There's little glitchy patches that are happening out on the horizon. And then it cuts back to Mara's dad back in the hospital or wherever he's actually located at. He's watching all of this that's happened. He's watching it on the bank of computer monitors that he has, video monitors that he has. And then it cuts back to the crazy Danish people. The crazy Danish lady, she's telling her daughter to stop everything because she thinks that her daughter is carrying God's baby, although we know it was a product of grape, and her daughter killed the grapist. But she's gone nuts. She thinks that the baby is the child of God. So she's telling her daughter Tova is her name. Tove, you got to stop everything. And Tove tells her mom that she says you're crazy. And then Franz, the German guy who led the rebellion of the people, the mutiny of the ship, and he's one of the head engine room guys. He comes and he tries to get the daughter away, tries to send her away. Then it cuts back to Mara. She's crawling back to the ship through her tunnel. And then Daniel, he's crawling through more tunnels, and he comes out in a winterscape. And there's blood trails through the snow that go into this random little hut. He looks at that, and then the scenery starts to glitch again, and he sees a panel just across this courtyard of this house. And so he goes across and he opens up the panel and he crawls into another part of the electrical system. And then it cuts to the engine room. And they're in the engine room, and Tove, she explains the situation to Franz, and Franz tells the Polish guy, Oleg, says you go up and steer the ship. You just go and steer it directly into the waves. If it gets parallel to the waves, the ship will just capsize, which is actually what you want to do. If you've watched any of my Maritime Monday shows, we've mentioned that a few times, that when you're going into rough weather, you want to sail directly into the wave, because if you get parallel to the wave will crest, it'll roll your ship, and you'll die. So that was actually a very, very nice, good piece of actual maritime admiralty related advice. So he tells Daniel to go steer directly into the wave, and he tells Oleg to go steer directly into the waves. Then it cuts to Mara and Daniel's room. So Mara goes to Daniel's room, and then under his bed to his tunnel, and then she follows the tunnel in Daniel's room, and she sees a black and white picture of her on his floor before she goes in the tunnel. And so that makes her wonder, oh, geez, why he's got this picture of me? Maybe this thing is real. Then she crawls through the tunnel. And then she goes into this room that we saw at the beginning where she was having sex with Daniel. And then she flashes back to the sex scene with Daniel and realizes she's in that room where she's flashing back to. And then she sees around the picture, there's lots of pictures around the room. There's lots of pictures of her and Daniel and the boy. And so it's possible it's her son. Could the boy be her son? And then it comes back to Daniel. He finally, I guess, crawls through the electrical conduits and ends up back in the hospital world, the hospital dimension, wherever it is. And he sees the grave on the hill where Mara knows that someone's buried there. It's kind of come into play a few times during the series if you've been watching. But he goes up to the grave. He starts clearing the dirt off the grave. He opens the casket. It's empty, and then he jumps in, and it turns out it's actually a ladder. So he goes into the coffin and goes down this ladder, and then he's in like a survival bunker, and the boy is inside the bunker. And the boy says, "It's happening again." And Daniel says they're shutting it down, but we've never got this far before. We're not lost yet. And then the boy asks, "Did you get the code? Mom, where is she?" And then Daniel says she doesn't remember. So now we know that the boy is her son. So she doesn't remember. We'll get her, and so she can stop it once and for all. So apparently, whatever all of this is that's happening, apparently Mara can control everything. Mara's got some sort of code that'll allow them to stop this. And the boy gives Daniel a wedding band, which is presumably Daniel and Mara's wedding band, and says he just gives the boy gives Daniel the wedding band and says she'll wake up this time. Then it cuts back to the chief officer. He's still manipulating this tablet-like device, but now it says shut down in 30 minutes, and then he sends a coded message to the guy that's doing all of this, Mara's father. And then it cuts to the Polish guy Polish guy and his new girlfriend Yingli, they run up to the bridge and they start steering the ship. Then it cuts back to Daniel. Daniel crawls back through the conduits to his room and into his tunnel. And then we I guess that's where we find out that they live in this pyramid, I guess. And Mara figured out that the boys are son, and she still doesn't believe it. So that, she's in the room. Daniel comes in. They talk about their son. She's the picture, but she still won't believe it's her son. So Daniel says, "You've just forgotten because you wanted to forget the pain." Doesn't explain what that means. Then Mara flashes back to this sex scene again, and they kiss. And then she flashes some more. And Daniel says, "This isn't real. It is just a construct, a simulation." And then he refers to Plato's allegory of the cave and says, "We're shadows on a cave wall." And for those of you that don't know, gee, here, I was weird fact about me. I was a philosophy major in university. So, hey, my my useless education has now become useful for this episode. Plato's allegory of the cave, very quickly, is there's a group of people trapped in a cave. And well, they live in this cave and they see shadows of people on the wall, and they think that this is reality because they only see the shadows, but it's actually the shadows of other people that are being cast on the wall of the cave that they're seeing. And so that Daniel explains this and says, well, he says it's like Plato's allegory. We're shadows on a cave wall. He said, look over your shoulder. Look what's causing the shadows. You must remember, or there's nothing left to wake up to. And then it comes back to the ship. The weather's worsening. Mrs. Wilson's arm is mostly black now. And Mara's dad is watching all of this again. He gets the chief officer's message, and the message from the chief officer says, "I know where the boy is." So then the chief officer goes into Mara's room, into the tunnel. Mara, and when he's going into Mara's tunnel, Mara and Daniel are coming back to the ship through whatever tunnel they came back through. I believe they came back through Daniel's tunnel. I'm not sure. But Daniel explains to Mara, he said, "I need the code to override the termination of the simulation." And Mara has this key inside of a locket, and she doesn't know what it opens. She says it was in the letter from her brother. And then it cuts back to Mara's father, and suddenly he's looking concerned when Mara mentions that she got this key from her brother. And then Daniel says Mara will wake up this time. Then it cuts back to the French guy in the he's in the engine room shoveling coal. He has a big seizure, and they decide to take him to the cabin. So Jerome, the black guy, and his and Lucian's wife, they're in this weird little throuple thing going on here. They take him back to their cabin. And cuts back to Daniel. Daniel then takes Mara to the hidden tablet, because Daniel knows where this tablet was that the chief officer was messing with is. So he goes there, and then he hooks up his little remote control device to it. And he says that hooking this up will allow them to reboot together. And he says this has happened dozens of times. This reboot has happened dozens of times. He said then he explains a little bit more. He said every simulation is 8 days, but no ship has ever reached its destination. And then it shows the monitor on the tablet, and it says shut down in 10 minutes. Then it cuts to the bridge, and Ying Li, she's looking out the window into the storm, and she sees her mother on deck. Her mother calls to her, so she freaks out and runs out on the deck. We know her mother's dead because we watched her jump over the ship with all the other people when they all went lemming-like and jumped over the ship rail. But Ying Li runs out onto the deck anyway, looking for her mother. And Oleg's like, holy crap, I got to go after this stupid girl. So he runs out there, leaves the ship to steer itself. He gets out on the deck, and just as he gets out on deck, a big wave comes and hits him and knocks him over, and he falls off the ship. He's dead. Then it cuts to Lucian's room, where he's been carried after his seizure, and he's dead. They pronounce him dead there, and he's in his cabin. So everybody's starting to die on the ship, and the ship is continually getting pounded by waves. Then it cuts down to the engine room. Something falls, and the fake Portuguese priest gets crushed by a big piece of metal. He's gone, apparently. Then it cuts back to the Danish girl, the German guy, Franz, and Danish girl's crazy mom. They're sitting in the passageway, and it's just filling full of water. I guess there's been a hole punched in the ship. So it's filling full of water, and they're starting to drown. And he's like, oh, we got to get out of here. They're all speaking to each other in some sort of German-Danish kind of pigeon talk. So the German tells he says to Tove, you got to escape, go escape. So they run down the passageway. The mother doesn't want to go. The crazy Danish woman, she just won't go. She just says it's God's will or whatever. And so the German guy, they say, let's get out of here. They go to the gate. They go to this door. They're going to shut this bulkhead door. But if they go through the door, she notices it doesn't have a handle on the other side. So they don't have a way of shutting or locking this bulkhead door to prevent water from flooding the rest of the ship. So the German guy, he shoves Tove through the wall, slams the door, and closes down the hatch. Hey, dogs. Closes the hatch, and he just tells her to run. So he sacrifices himself to save Tove. So Tove's crazy Danish mom is dead, and now Franz, the leader of the mutiny, he is also dead. Everybody's dying. And Marin's dad is watching all of this again. It cuts back to him watching everything on the monitors. The chief officer brings the boy and the pyramid because he said he knew where they were. I guess he did because he brought them. And then Mara's dad says, every time they make the same mistakes and die because they can't get rid of emotions. That's their weakness. The feelings cloud the mind. So somehow it seems like he's running some sort of brain experiment trying to eradicate human emotion from people's decisions. And it doesn't explain it any more than that. He just says every time they do this, they make the same choices, and every time they die, emotions are a weakness. The feelings cloud the mind. And then it comes back again to Daniel and Mara. They're in the door. They go through the door to the hospital tunnel, but they want to go through the door to the hospital tunnel in Mara's room, but it's closed. It's blocked off. It doesn't exist anymore. And they're like, where did this door go? And I don't know. And then suddenly Marin's dad's voice comes over the PA system of the ship. Who knew there was a PA system in 1899? But his voice comes over whatever PA system exists in this reality. And he says, you've come far this time. You failed again. Reprogramming won't help. You're trapped in the simulation loop. I want that key, and you can keep your son. So whatever this key is, it does something he doesn't want to do, and it does something that the Mara and the rest of the people want to do. And in exchange, he's willing to give her the son. Then Daniel, he hands Mara the wedding ring, and he runs off. Now the Mara's dad, he's in this office computer room thing where he lives, and he takes the boy's pyramid and turns it a bit. And he says, the Kerberos will be archived. Mother will bring the key, and this will finally come to an end. Then the shutdown counter counts to 0. The ship plunges into a whirlpool, this gigantic, well, it doesn't plunge down into a whirlpool. It sort of plunges up into a whirlpool. Somehow it's a confusing sequence. And then there's a bright light, and then everything goes black. And if you remember at the end of the last episode we reviewed, the captain, he was sent by the chief officer to some other place where there's like dozens and dozens of ships, just floating derelict, wrecked ships, which I guess corroborates Daniel's statement that this has happened dozens of times before. But the captain is on the bridge of whatever ship he got sent to, and he is just drinking some booze. He hears a noise outside, so he runs up to see what the noise is. And the sun is just coming up, and again, there's dozens of these giant ships just floating around in this little area. And suddenly a whirlpool opens, and the Kerberos comes up to float right next to this ship. And the captain sees everybody, the survivors on the Kerberos, the people on the Kerberos see him. They shed tears at each other. And then one of my favorite songs, The Wind by Cat Stevens, starts to play. And while the wind is playing, they continue to look at each other. Then it fades to black, and that's the end of the episode. So we've got one more episode. Are we going to wrap it up? Is it going to be a series finale, or is it going to set up a season 2? I guess we're just going to have to wait, because right now they're starting to answer all of the questions. So we'll have to see. They could be setting up for another reboot for the next season, and then they try to do it again, which could mean this show could go on as long as people want it to, as long as it's interesting, or they could just wrap everything up in the next episode. We'll just have to wait and see. But we're coming to the end of this. We got one more. So look for the review of episode 8 to find out what the season finale is. We'll be there. And until then, don't forget to enjoy your legal vices. Take care. Bye.